We've been keeping an eye on the questions coming in. Now that we finished with the presentation, we will start going through some of those. As a reminder, go ahead and submit any questions you have that you'd like answered tonight via the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. The thumbs up icon next to each question moves that up the list and tells us you want us to answer that first. We'll try to get through as many questions as we can tonight, and if we I think we will, but if we also have an in-person version of this meeting tomorrow night. So at Northridge Elementary School from 5:30 to 7 p.m. tomorrow, we will have the same information available, and members of our study team will be there to answer questions one-on-one. So feel free to invite your neighbors to that or come to that as well if you have more questions after tonight. As I mentioned at the start of the meeting, we do have a group of panelists from our study team that are on the line. Eric Rasband, Diego Carroll, Carissa Watanabe, Ryan Pitts, Justin Peterson, Mike Heaps, and myself, Tiffany Carlson. And I will go through those questions and put those out to the panelists to answer. As a reminder, the comment period for this part of the study ends November 24th. So please submit a formal comment by then. Again, the things that we're looking for: tell us how you use the road, how you live or work here, any environmental considerations that you want us to consider, and some of the things that Eric mentioned. Do you want to be able to use your trash can on the curb in front of your yard? Do you want separation between the sidewalk and travel lane? So some things to think about as we move forward. Let's go to some of the questions here. So one of the questions we have is from Leah Johnson. And she says, hi, thanks for talking with us. What will you do to soundproof for the residents nearby? 1600 North is already loud, but will get louder. I'm going to send that one to you, Justin, if you don't mind.
Thanks, Tiffany. Great question. So when UDOT undertakes an environmental study like this, we also include a pretty detailed and thorough noise analysis. This analysis compares what the existing levels are to what the future levels could be. And if impacts are identified as defined by UDOT's noise policy, we would evaluate ways to reduce those noise levels. It's important to note that noise impacts are primarily considered for outdoor areas. So like your backyard or your front yard. And there are only a few select land use types where indoor noise is considered, like a church or a school. And so for residences, we will be looking at outdoor noise. And as I mentioned, if impacts are identified, we will evaluate the effectiveness of a noise wall. And if that noise wall is deemed effective, according to UDOT's noise policy, then the next step in a subsequent phase of the project would be to recommend it for balloting, and residents who would be benefited by that noise wall would have a chance to vote for or against that wall. We won't know if a wall is going to be proposed and if it will be effective until farther down the road in the study, but all the results will be disclosed in the environmental document.
One more thing to add is UDOT has created a video on this the noise policy. UDOT has a noise policy that we follow, and it's pretty technical. It's sometimes can be hard to understand, but we have created a video that explains the policy in a pretty simple way, and we will make that. That video is actually live right now on our website, so you can go there and watch that after this meeting if you are interested in that. Justin, one follow-up question for you. Are we going to need to get on people's properties in order to conduct the noise analysis when you're at that point?
Yes, we will. In the coming weeks, we will go out and measure the existing noise levels. So if you're one of the lucky ones, you might see us on your property with our noise meter. Usually takes about 20 minutes to take a measurement, and we'll be doing that at 5 different locations along the corridor.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, our next question is from Ken Millett. Will the project include any changes to the existing traffic intersection at 1600 North and State Street? Yes, Eric.
I'll jump on that.
Thank you.
We will evaluate traffic operations at that location. And based on that analysis, there might be some adjustments, but we won't know that until later in the study after some of the detailed analysis has been completed.
Okay. The next question is from Mark Hinckley. Is there any intention to expand the study and possible changes at 1600 North to 400 West in Orem instead of stopping at State Street? There is a proposed large development for the northeast corner of 1600 North and State Street that should be considered. Eric, do you want to take that one as well?
Yeah, ownership of the corridor is from Geneva Road to State Street for the Utah Department of Transportation. We will evaluate the east side of the intersection at State Street to have a better understanding of how it interacts with the overall corridor and with the State Street corridor. So will there be modifications to 400 West? I don't know yet, but we will do some evaluations of that area. It is part of our study area.
Great, thank you. This one comes from Bev Davis. Why would enlargement of the road only be taking ground from the south side? Carissa, can I ask you to answer that question?
Sure. So there were two options which would include widening the roadway. One of them was the meander option, which would adjust the road widening from the north and also to the south to minimize impacts. And then the other option was just widening from the south. And that was what was previously studied by the city of Orem. So there'll be two different options that will be evaluated.
Great, thank you. Kind of a follow-up to that. This was from Gwenna Terry. I am wondering why one option is to widen to the south. Aren't there fewer houses impacted on the north side? And yeah, Carissa, I'm going to give that back to you.
Yeah, so one of the options to widen from the south, that was what was previously studied in the city of Orem planning document. And so that's why we're including it as part of one of the alignments to be evaluated.
So the follow-up is, aren't there fewer houses impacted on the north side? And if correct me if I'm wrong, Carissa, but one of the reasons why Orem City studied that option was because there are some other resources on the north side that are harder to avoid. Is that right, Eric? Do you want to chime in?
Yeah, so I just want to reiterate what Carissa said, that a previous study that was completed by Orem City is an input to this overall study. And we will be looking at the overall corridor and looking to minimize those impacts. There are concerns about the schools and the churches and that high energy power line along the north side, those impacts. And so we're going to look to find a solution that will provide the least amount of impact to the public.
Great, thank you, Eric. Stay on. I'm going to ask you another question. Ken Millett says, what are the current widths of the lanes?
I have not measured those directly. The center turn lane is likely somewhere between 10 feet and 14 feet. And then there is not a striped shoulder along the corridor, if I remember correctly. So it's fairly wide if you include the travel lane and then the parking that is along the shoulders. Typically a travel lane that you would see on the freeway or on State Street is 12 feet wide. We do see some locations where we see a reduction of travel lane width at 11 feet, but typically for a state corridor, we would not go below 11-foot wide travel lane.
Great, thank you. The next question comes from Jim Condi. So the intersection at 1600 North and 400 West has been redesigned a few times. According to Orem City, we still have an average of 1 accident per week at this intersection. Further, a property owner wants to build high-density housing on 1600 North and between State Street and 400 West. Additionally, when the Linden Temple for the Church of Jesus Christ goes in, additional load will be added. I am concerned with the increased load on 400 West that the road expansion might add.
Yeah, I'll jump back in on this one. So just to reiterate, the jurisdiction that UDOT has control of along 1600 North is from Geneva Road to State Street. Our study area does include the intersection at 400 West, and we will evaluate that. And based on that analysis, we will make recommendations moving forward.
Okay, great. Jack Taylor asks, when is this actually going to be built? You want to take that too, Eric?
Yeah, so we anticipate this state environmental study will take approximately a year to complete. So we're hoping by this time next year, maybe into December of next year, we'll be complete with the environmental study. And depending on the outcome of that study, the project could then move into design, right-of-way acquisition, utility work that might need to take place, with a likely construction timeline in year 2024.
Okay. Mark Hamilton asked, if the expansion is the path forward, are the park strips necessary? Or because of the wide shoulder, could we skip the park strip and just do a sidewalk? With the flip the strip program already in place, it seems strange to intentionally add or preserve them. You know about this, Eric, I can see.
This is a great comment, and this is one that we would love to see as a comment come officially through the channels. This is your corridor. We want to make sure that it meets the needs of the community. And so we'll take the comments that we received through this public comment period, and we'll incorporate those into the options that we'll be evaluating into the future.
That's a great one to send in, Mark, as a formal comment. Thank you. Ralph Decker is asking, one house has already been taken down on the south side and 2 more have been disconnected from power and water. Why has the work been started if the final plan has not been concluded?
As mentioned in our presentation, Orem City received a grant through Utah County and the Mountain Land Association of Governments to start preserving the corridor. And so through that process, they identified willing sellers. Orem City was a willing buyer and purchased the property. We often do that for construction projects because right-of-way real estate gets more expensive the longer we wait. And so if we can purchase the property when we have a fairly good idea of what a corridor might be, then we'll purchase that. And if we don't use that property, we can resell it and have it repurposed for public use.
Okay, we have one here from Will Frieden. I hope I'm saying your name right. I don't have a question, but I do support the no action. I believe we have 3 other large corridors, 800 North, Center Street, and University Parkway, to handle traffic that comes through Orem. The 1600 North corridor was never meant to be a large traffic corridor, and I am opposed to expanding it to be so. I have lived in Orem for 40+ years, and we recently voted for city council and mayoral candidates who want to keep Orem Family Center USA. So again, that's a great comment to send in as a formal comment. We have channels set up to take those through our email or our website, or you can send us a letter in the mail if you want to. But these are the kinds of things exactly that we're asking for tonight. So thanks for your comment, Will. This one's from Scott Whittier. It seems that there has been very little discussion regarding Tanglewood Estates, corner of 1600 and 1200. So many impacts with this property that seem to be ignored. I will discuss these in person tomorrow. That will be great, Scott, to hear from you tomorrow. And probably really good for you to formalize that in a written comment to us as well. Ralph Decker, let's see, we've answered that one already. Leah Johnson, I live on a cul-de-sac off 1600 North. Will there be any road outlets to let me get out a different way? Eric, I don't know if you have an answer for that.
I don't have an answer today. If that's a concern, I would ask you to provide a formal comment and then we will evaluate it through the process.
And another one from Leah, any chance of selling parcels off of 1600 North to the nearest neighbors?
Ray, can you jump in on this one and give us some feedback on what might happen to properties that might be surplus at the end?
Well, yeah, there's always a possibility of that. On the 800 North project, which I was involved in, the city of Orem decided that they wanted to have that as a parkway, so we didn't sell any off to speak of. Sometimes some will be sold off to adjoining property owners. Typically, the UDOT process for handling property, surplus property, should it be declared surplus property, is to put it on the open market, and typically we've done it by silent auction, so we maximize any revenue that the state might gain for the money they've spent. But there is some provision sometimes to sell it to an adjacent property owner if it's a small enough parcel that it has no other utility except to the neighbor. So I'm sorry, Lee, I'd like to give you a better answer, but the answer is it depends on the design. We are just too early and we don't know. But we don't like, as the state, to hold property where it's tax exempt and not have it utilized. So we make every attempt to do that as efficiently as we can.
Thanks, Ray. Here's another one about traffic. Are there any statistics about what the eastbound traffic does when it arrives at State Street? How much of the traffic turns north? How much turns south? And how much continues west? Mike Heaps.
Yeah,
Ready.
there is statistics on that. Let me calculate it on the spot. So in the AM, it looks like you get about 25% turning left as far as eastbound traffic goes. 50% goes through, 25% turns right. And then in the PM peak hour, so that's in that 4 to 6 PM range, looks like you get a higher percentage going through. It looks like about 2/3 of the traffic is going through with rights and lefts split pretty equally.
And that's current traffic data.
That is 2021. Yes,
Okay,
we counted the whole corridor between Geneva Road to on the west side to 400 West on the east side. All this intersections, all the accesses. So a pretty robust data collection effort.
Great. And so in general, on these state environmental studies, we do a lot of traffic analysis to understand what it looks like now and what it will look like in the future. And that's kind of where we determine what our need for the project is. So we'll have a lot more information about that. Right now, we're in the data gathering phase. We're gathering all the data we can on traffic, on those environmental resources that Chris identified earlier, and then also taking comments from you, the public, as we start really moving into the study. The next question is from Leah Johnson. Any chance of having community gardens or orchards in bigger parcels of land than are needed for the road widening project? Otherwise, it just ends up being grass to water. Or on those bigger parcels, can we put the bus stops off the road because they get in the way of visibility and smoothness of flow of traffic? Eric, do you have some insight on that?
If I can hit that unmute button. This is another one that's a great comment that we'd love to see in the public comment, and then we can evaluate it further.
Okay, here's one from Melissa Saby. Says, I'm the area director for the Del Taco right on 1600 North. How much property would you be taking from the south? My drive-through is already really close to 1600 North.
So we are early in the process and we don't have concepts fully identified yet. As we get closer to having some of those concepts identified, the project team will be reaching out to those property owners that will be directly impacted to discuss options with them.
But again, Melissa, a great comment to send in as a formal comment, and we will keep an eye on that as we move through the process. Another comment from Ken Millett: how much will the massive power lines on the north side of the street affect the project? Could the power lines be moved or are they permanent? And this, yep, Eric, back to you.
Yeah, the power lines are a little bit of a challenge for us. Anything can be moved, but they are big and they are very expensive. We will go through the process, and if the impacts to the environment and to the residents are such, that would be an option that we would evaluate, but they tend to be a limiting factor.
Great. Carol Hinckley asks, is this widening only going to go just past the State Street to the left lane leading to Linden, or will it go east and south all the way to 800 North?
So we are currently evaluating directly the segments from 1200 West in Orem to State Street in Orem as well. There are areas of influence, both east and west of those limits that we will be evaluating, but we don't have an answer yet on where those improvements may or may not be.
Okay. One more reminder here, these comments that we're getting here through the Q&A are not considered formal comments. And so if you would like them to be considered formal comments, please send them in an email to us or send them through our website. Again, our email is 1600north@utah.gov. Our website is udot.utah.gov/go/1600north. The next question is from Bev Davis, and Justin, I'm going to send this to you and maybe Carissa. Has UDOT's noise policy changed in the last 15 to 20 years? I live by where one of those noise walls was put in at Provo Canyon, and all it did was force the sound higher to a different neighborhood. Do you want to take that, Justin?
Yep, I can start it, and Carissa, if you want to fill in any gaps. Yes, Bev, the noise policy has changed several times over the last 15 to 20 years. In the time that I've been doing this, over the last 7 years or so, it's changed a couple of times. And one of those changes modified the criteria for noise walls to qualify for balloting, as I mentioned that balloting process earlier. And it is not uncommon for noise walls to alter the way that sound moves from the road to outward towards other homes that are beyond the noise wall. I think it's important to note that the noise wall, the noise policy as it's written, is intended to reduce the noise levels for the homes that are closest to the highway or closest to the road. So we call those front row. And so preference is given to those properties because they experience the grunt of the impact from these road widening projects. And so that's currently how the policy is written. And Carissa, I don't know if you had anything else to add, but.
I think you did a great job.
Okay.
Justin, thanks, Justin. Okay, one from Laura Jamalkowski. In the Orem city plan, they were planning on making a frontage road in front of the houses on the north side of the road. Would that be a consideration still? Ryan, you want to take this one?
Yeah, I feel like Eric's getting lots of questions thrown to him, so I'll jump in and answer this one. Yes, we are familiar with Orem City's plan and the idea of putting a frontage road in front of the homes, and we will evaluate that idea and that concept through this process and see if it makes sense still, and see if it's still a good solution. So we will have more information on that when we finalize the study, but we will consider it.
Okay, don't go anywhere, Ryan.
Okay.
Jack Taylor asks, what do you do with the formal comments you receive?
Well, we are going to work together as a project team to review all of the comments that we receive, and we are going to assign them to individuals within the team to address, to make sure that we understand and are addressing what the concerns are. And they will be included in a report that will be part of the state environmental study. So please make formal comments. We will consider them and even reach out if we have follow-up questions for you. So please do give us formal comments.
Thanks, Ryan. So a couple questions on traffic. Mike Heaps, do you want to come back online? The first question is, what method did you use to do your traffic counts?
So we used a couple of different methods. The primary method was we blanketed the corridor with a little GoPro type video recorders, recorded them, took them back to the office, and then counted each individual intersection. So that's how we know how much traffic is going through, how much traffic is turning left or right. So those are our intersection turning movement counts. Then we also put up several pneumatic tube counters. If you've seen those black tubes running across the road, and that just tells us how much traffic is going through, how traffic fluctuates throughout the 24-hour period or individual days.
Okay, and here's a follow-up question to that from Stephanie Visna. Will that traffic study that Heaps mentioned be available now?
Not now. We're still gathering the data, compiling it, but there will be a full traffic report generated for this study, and that will be made available.
Great, thank you. We have another question from Jim Condi. Can you speak to the traffic at the 1600 North, 400 West intersection, specifically to the impact on 400 West? And I'm not sure, Mike, if you have that answer also.
Yeah, I can jump in. So I can't speak to the operations or impacts currently, but like Eric mentioned, that is an intersection that we are looking at. So in that report, we'll discuss existing operations. We're going to look all the way out to the year 2050. So all that future development in the area, I think they're mentioned the temple and other projects coming down the pipe. You'll see how that intersection operates in the future also, and we'll make recommendations based on that analysis.
Great, thank you. Another question from Jack Taylor. You keep mentioning that roads UDOT doesn't own is in your study area. What does that mean?
So jurisdiction of roads is typically divided up between state highways and local jurisdiction roads. And so this segment of 1600 North between Geneva Road and State Street is designated now as State Route 241. It went through a jurisdictional transfer that was approved by the Transportation Commission in November of 2019. Since that time, UDOT has taken over the maintenance and management responsibilities for the corridor. State Street is also a state road. It's US 89. It runs north-south through Utah County. Geneva Road is another state route, SR 114. Some of the other roads that have been asked about would be 1600 North east of State Street that is under Orem City's jurisdiction. 400 West would be another road under Orem City's jurisdiction. What we are doing is we're studying those areas because we need to understand if the impacts of this roadway widening extend beyond where the area that we're looking at. And if they are, we will make recommendations and work with Orem City on solutions in those areas.
Thank you. So I want to just remind everybody the ways that you can make a formal comment. Duke, do you mind sharing that slide one more time? So here's all the ways that you can send us comments. We have an email. It's 1600north@utah.gov. 1600 North Environmental Study. We have a mailing address as well if you'd like to send us in a written letter. We also have a website that's udot.utah.gov/go/1600 North, and there is a comment form on that website that you can submit through there that sort of helps you think about some of the things that maybe we should comment on, or you can send us an email that's just, you know, whatever you want to say, the kind of things we're looking for, how to use this road, how do you live or work here, do you drive here, do you have a property here that you have concerns about, those are the things we want to know as we move forward in this study. So we can go back to the questions, but I wanted to just put that back out there again. We have a question from Christian Cano, and this is probably for Eric again, or Ryan. What kind of pedestrian, bicycle, and transit infrastructure will be included in this project?
So earlier in the presentation, we referenced the Mountain Land Association of Governments Regional Transportation Plan. That group is responsible for working with all of the local communities and coming up with a regional transportation plan that reflects the transportation plan of the communities. UDOT would be considered one of those communities that provides input to that regional transportation plan. For 1600 North, this roadway was identified for widening improvements back as far as 1992. And in addition to that, it's identified as a corridor for active transportation. So pedestrian walkways, bicycle corridors those could be either on-street bicycle lanes or a dedicated bicycle path. And then this corridor also serves at least one of the UTA bus routes. And so we would look to that regional plan, and of course, part of what we're doing here in this scoping meeting is we're hoping to get feedback from you as a community on what you would like along this corridor. And then we will do the analysis and make recommendations as we continue the study moving forward.
But I would say, again, if there's something you want to see there, send us a formal comment and let us know what you'd like to see studied here. We have another comment from Lene. Has there been discussion or a plan to encourage or funnel the traffic now continuing east on 1600 North and turning north 400 West, traveling through to Linden and PG, to instead go north on State instead of 400 West in front of the homes?
I don't know that there's an actual plan other than to say traffic flow is very much, we see traffic patterns change on a regular basis based on resistance or ease of movement. And certainly one of the things that we'll be looking at is the overall traffic operations at the State Street intersection. Do we need additional left turn or right turn lanes at that location? Do we need increases in through lanes? The traffic analysis that Mike will be doing for us will help inform those decisions as we move forward. But I'm not aware of any specific plan to funnel traffic in a different direction. We just are building a really good, we're focused on partnering with our local governments and with the Mountain Land Association of Governments, developing a robust grid network that will help serve the overall transportation needs in the county.
Thank you. So we wanted to share a reminder. We do have an in-person meeting tomorrow. It's at Northridge Elementary School from 5:30 to 7 p.m. The panelists that are here tonight will be there to answer questions. We'll be reviewing the same information there. It's an open house style. You can come and go anytime between 5:30 and 7. There's not an official presentation, but we will have the same information available and be there to answer questions. So if you'd like to come and talk to us in person tomorrow, feel free to do that. And that's, again, starts at 5:30 tomorrow night. So we do have another question we can go back to. Gregory Anderson asks, do you anticipate any traffic impact in the future as more electric vehicles and self-driving vehicles are included in the traffic mix? Mike, do you have? Yes.
Yeah, that is a great question. I think that's the question all of us traffic engineers are asking is some as technology advances and these things come online, what is going to be the impact? And that is something that we can do sensitivity analysis to look at connected vehicles, autonomous vehicles, that type of thing. It's probably not going to be a main element of our study, but that is something we can do some sensitivity analysis on and inform the study group.
Great, thank you. We have a shout out for Save Del Taco in the Q&A from Stephanie's husband. So there you go, Stephanie's husband. Jack Taylor asks, do you know how long construction will last? Eric, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, we anticipate 1 year, but there's always a possibility that would extend slightly into a following year. Our goal would be, of course, to try and complete it as quickly as possible to minimize impacts to the public.
Great. And Duke, I'm wondering if you can open the schedule slide again. So as a reminder, we're going to go through this study. We're starting it now. We're currently in the scoping phase of the project. Scoping means that we are data gathering, getting all the information that we can, soliciting feedback from the public. That's what we're trying to achieve tonight and tomorrow night with our meetings. We will then move through some alternatives, try and figure out, what we actually want to study. We'll move that through, publish a draft of the study results, and then we'll have another opportunity in the future, looking through the fall next year, to review our draft study and gather feedback on the results of that. So there will be another formal comment period in late fall next year. But again, you can send comments anytime throughout the study. Our formal comment period ends for scoping on November 24th. So just a reminder there. We have another question. Thanks for pulling that up, Duke. This one's from Jack Taylor. If you build any noise walls, what will they look like? I've seen some really interesting ones in other places. Justin, do you want to take that one?
Sure. So UDOT has standard patterns, textures that are used. And so those are available in the UDOT design standards. A lot of what's been done recently is a precast stamped concrete that kind of looks like a block wall with some type of tan color. So that's the trend now. I don't anticipate that trend changing, but who knows? Generally speaking, they look a lot better than they used to be back in the 70s and 80s with the thin walls. And so if you're ever in the area of Taylorsville or West Valley or South Jordan on Bangor Highway, you can see what those new walls look like, or even on traveling on I-15 through Sandy. There's some newer walls there.
Thanks, Justin. A question about traffic lights. This is probably another one for Eric or Ryan. Will traffic lights be added between 1200 West and 800 West to aid cars needing to turn left onto 1600 North?
So when we worked with Orem City and Linden City to take over jurisdictional control of this corridor, we identified the access category for this corridor. 1600 North is considered a regional corridor that serves I-15 and the communities of Linden, Pleasant Grove, and North Orem. And so with that in mind, we're trying to preserve the functionality of 1600 North as a regional corridor. We do not anticipate any new traffic lights between the ones that are already in place.
Thank you. Maybe Eric, this is probably another one for you. We have a couple construction questions. So Ken Millett says, I use this road daily for my commute. Do you anticipate closing the road during construction?
We don't anticipate today that we will close the road. Our goal is always to minimize the traveling impact to the public. Sometimes it is less impactful to the public to close a road down for a period of time and get the work done in a much faster timeline. I would anticipate that this corridor will remain open during construction.
And another construction question. During construction, will we still be able to walk on 1600 North? There's a school that has lots of people going every day, both walking and cars.
That's a great question. Yeah, being that it's school traffic, I think we would work with any contractors that might come in this area to make sure that our school children are accommodated. But those details certainly would have to be dealt with at a future date. Probably through in the design process, if we move forward to that point.
Okay, a couple more for sound walls. So maybe Justin, back to you.
Yep.
How high are standard sound walls?
I wouldn't say there's a standard height per se. Each wall is designed based on the conditions of the project. So they're very project specific. On a project I'm working on now, we have walls that range in height between 13 and 20 feet, but that's a completely different type of road, has a lot more vehicles at higher speeds. So I can't speculate on if walls are warranted on this project, how tall they would be, but I hope that gives you an idea of kind of what you could expect. Looks like there's a second question there about sound walls. Do you want me to just read it?
Go ahead. Yes.
Will there be sound walls for the homes that are left on 1600 North, or will it be open? As I mentioned earlier in the Q&A, we are going to be conducting a thorough noise analysis that will compare the existing noise levels to the future noise levels. And if there are impacts identified as defined by UDOT's noise policy, we will evaluate the effectiveness of sound walls. And if they are effective, then we will recommend those for balloting. So each person who has benefited by that noise wall will receive a vote. And that balloting process usually takes place in a subsequent phase of the project, usually during final design, which would be the phase that follows this environmental phase.
Great. Thanks, Justin. And then this is, let's see, from John Lilly. How and when was it decided to upgrade on the south versus the north side of the road? Eric, do you want to take that?
Yeah, I think, John, you might be referencing the planning study that Orem City did, where they identified widening to the south. They went through some analysis and we're using that as an input, but we're not using that as a final decision. We will be looking at a meander option as well as the south option. That meander option would try to avoid the schools, the churches, and likely the overhead power lines in the area.
Great. We don't have any more questions. So with that, I'm going to go back to, I'm going to ask one more. Sorry, it just popped up. This will be our last question, and it's a good one. So Eric, I'm going to give this to you. When and if this project goes through, will the speed limit be increased from 35 miles per hour to something higher?
So I'm going to reach out to Ryan as well, but my expectation is that we would set a design speed for the corridor, and that's typically a little higher than the posted speed limit, and we would work to design the corridor to accommodate that speed. At this point, I think we're evaluating a 40-mile-an-hour design speed, which would leave the posted speed limit at 35 miles an hour. Ryan, that's my understanding, right?
That is correct. We are evaluating alternatives with a 40-mile-an-hour design speed. One thing to also remember is we typically in an environmental study don't commit to a specific speed limit, and those are details that sometimes get worked out more during the design phase. But for this preliminary effort for environmental, 40 miles an hour is the design speed we're going with.
Yeah, and Ryan, to go along with that, Ryan, the design speed will be set at 40, and then the posted speed could be 35, or it could be bumped up to 40. That will be determined later on.
Yeah.
Great question, Stephanie. I am going to entertain one more. With the price of homes today and the lack of housing, what kind of help will be offered to relocate? Ray, that's probably a question for you.
Yes. if in fact we displace residential folks in this project, then there's actually three things we do. We pay all of the moving expenses with a professional mover. And that hasn't been a concern lately, but we pay a mortgage interest differential should you have to get a mortgage at a higher rate than the one that you have. And the third thing is we have this thing called replacement housing. And in that, in addition to the appraised value that we pay for the property, we look at something that's equal or better in the neighborhood. And we do a study, and if that is greater than what we pay for the house, then subject to that study and it's a spend to get program. In other words, if somebody's going to downsize, they don't get that, but assuming they're going to buy something equal or better, then based on that study, we pay, we call it replacement housing, and typically we pay the difference. If somebody wants to way upgrade and go beyond that, they can do that too, but we only pay the amount of the study. Hope that helped.
And Marlon, one thing to consider, we don't know right now what those property impacts could look like. And so follow our website and keep in touch with the project as we move forward. We will know a lot more as we move through the study and into the summer and fall of next year. So it's 7 o'clock. We don't have any more questions here in the Q&A. So I do want to remind you, please send in formal comments. We have several ways that you can do that. Our email is 1600north@utah.gov. You can send us a letter if you want to at 1600 North Environmental Study Team, and that comes to this address here on your screen. We also have a website, udot.utah.gov/go/1600north. And if you are registered for this meeting tonight, you will be added to our contact list. And so as we move through the project, we will send updates through email, and we'll also update the website with study information. If you have other people that you know that want to be added to that list, please have them send us an email as well at 1600north@utah.gov.